All right, good morning and welcome to our channel. Today, I'm going to discuss a little bit about the future of Section 8 housing. We're going to be seeing likely big changes for 2026. Now, the current administration has made a lot of changes already from the beginning, and we've seen a lot of cuts to different programs across the board on many of the federal agencies. So, at current, when we're discussing housing, the first thing we notice is at this point, we know that HUD has lost 90% of its employees. So they're down to about 10%. They even sold the big building that they've had since probably the 60s there in DC. And now HUD has been combined with a different federal agency. So the goal, I believe, we talked a little bit, I think in January and February, about some of the potential goals this administration has for this program. And what I want to do is, rather than discuss the fiery topics of politics and who's right and who's wrong, let's talk about where this is going, and how we can adapt to this versus turning this video into a political platform, because I'm not interested in doing all that. So I think the inevitable's here. I mentioned in many prior videos all the way back to 2019 that eventually, sometime before 2030, we would likely see the end of an era, and we would see something new. And I believe that's what's going to be playing out at this point. Looking at 2025's budget as well as 2026, if it gets approved, and it likely will, I believe this will be the end of Section 8 as we know it. It doesn't mean that it's the end of vouchers. It doesn't mean it's the end of housing. It just means there's a lot of changes. And when you make this many, it's almost impossible to go back in time and recover this, even if there were a different president in office. So at present, we've lost about half the funding. And for 2026, the major changes, and what I want to talk about is not just the major changes, but what this is turning into. Now, in some ways, I believe that maybe looking at how things are going, we're going to have to adapt at a state level. And I'm going to explain why in a minute. But first, the proposed changes will be the final blow to the system, and that'll be for 2026. And that will be that beyond HUD being pretty much eliminated, we're probably going to see the end of most housing authorities as well, potentially. Now, they're going to be wrapping this up in two packages in 2026. The first will be the first proposed budget cut, and its changes will be the Continuum of Care program, Housing First, HOPWA, and ESG. So those of you that are homeless, extreme low income, and have survived in those particular programs, all this will be wrapped up and will be put into a state-funded program. So the federal government, or at least Congress, is rolling this together, and they want all the funds that are going to go into this program to be issued as one big check to the state, and then the state allocate from there. And we're going to discuss a little bit how that might work, because I find myself in a 25-year career, and now I'm trying to figure out, okay, if we're taking this down from the federal level and we're handing this over to the state, how do we adapt there? Now, some things are not going to change, because look, once you do this, that means that the state picks it up, and they have a lot of work to do in order to make this work. So they're going to need the help of probably a lot of housing authorities that are out there or even bankrupt at that point. So I know right now many housing authorities are questioning their existence, and probably, except for the major ones in New York, LA, and other big cities, many of these housing authorities will begin to fail or become insolvent from the lack of funding. And the final blow will absolutely be if these changes are made in 2026. The only way these changes would not occur is if somehow Democrats took the House and were able to stop this. And even then, it wouldn't effectively stop all things. It would just be more bipartisan at that point. So the second is going to be the state rental assistance block, is what they're going to be calling this. And so the second loading will be for all housing choice vouchers, subsidies, LITCH. We got further programs in there for the disabled. So the secondary is the non-homeless, and all vouchers will be rolled into a state block, and that will be handed down to the state as well. So the federal government will no longer handle housing or vouchers whatsoever, and it'll all be rolled into one big paycheck, basically. And what I'm doing here is I'm simplifying this. It will be handed down to the states. So as we look from the state level, what will likely happen is the larger cities like LA and New York and some of the others, they will likely run this through some of their state agencies. Like I would imagine the most logical path is Health and Human Services for most states. So they would be the ones administrating this unless they come up with an agreement with the former housing authority. So I think there will be big fallout for housing authorities, and I think that they know that's a reality because many housing authorities right now have stopped issuing because they simply do not have the funds or they're hanging on the last few dollars they have. But on 2026, when this goes through, it's highly unlikely that the vast majority of housing authorities that are smaller than the big cities will likely survive this. If they do, then they'll be on a very limited budget. But I would imagine since this is all going to be sent now as a payment to states, that Health and Human Services, unless the city or state contracts with the former housing authority to let them do partially this job or all the job, then most housing authorities will disappear. Okay, so this will be a reinvention of the system. Now, this could play out to be a really good thing or a really bad thing. I have mixed feelings about states handling this type of thing. And of course, at first, there'll probably be a lot of fraud and other things going on because the system won't have a lot of checks and balances in place. So HUD will still remain in a minor capacity in the background for issues related to discrimination and other issues. But to what avail, I don't know. So that's where I see at this point, looking at the agenda for 2026, that going. Now, one thing we're going to be looking at is some of the budgeting here. I didn't feel like memorizing this morning, so the overall funding will be cut $32.9 billion. Rental assistance will get cut at $26.7 billion. Homeless assistance will be $532 million, which is almost all of it. Native Americans housing will be cut $250 million, which is almost all of it. Community development will be cut $5 billion. So you can forget about that. So home ownership's gone. Self-sufficiency's gone. Fair housing almost gone. USDA gone. Rural development and rural housing services $1 billion, pretty much gone. Rural rental assistance gone at 70. Well, rural assistance will be there at 70 million, but that isn't a lot. Okay, so the motivation here is and I understand the logic behind this. If you cut all this, then it does actually cripple the housing authority. And I think that's the goal here is rather than create the change here that Mr. Trump is looking for, he figured out how to defund housing authorities, which in effect ended Section 8 as it is. So now the housing itself, we'll still continue to refer to this as Section 8 housing, but in the future, this was something that will likely be delegated through the state. Now, it's the state's decision whether or not they delegate this to the Council on Aging, for those of you who are seniors or disabled, and Health and Human Services to get a voucher if you're otherwise, which means a person that's disabled. Now, the bigger change we're going to see is wait times will likely drop by nearly half, if not more, and probably be for the first time in 50 to 80 years will return to normal. There will be work requirements and a 2-year cap on vouchers. If you do not have a senior or a disabled person in your home, then in 2026 going forward, as they figure out how to start working this at the state level, what will happen is most of you will probably find it not relevant to even apply for that type of voucher. In other words, a 2-year voucher with work requirements is probably not a likely thing for most of you. So if you do not have a child or another person in your family composition that is a senior or a person with a disability, then likely Section 8 will not be worth your time. Okay, that will pretty much remove 60% of all people that are on a voucher. So 2.3 million people will lose their voucher. 60,000 plus vouchers will flow back into the system. We'll see wait times drop about 80%. This will be dealt with through the state. Now, look, we've all been to the Social Security office. We've been to Health and Human Services. Those guys can be pretty good. I'm wondering if this burden could turn them rather evil. So rather than looking at this as this big implosion or destruction of the system, think of it as a fresh start after 50 to 80 years. There's no other choice. This is where it's going to go, and 2027 is going to push it further. So those that are disabled and seniors will likely greatly benefit from this, and you'll find that times to get vouchers and a less complicated system. We'll also probably see the evaporation, insolvency of roughly 90% of the housing authorities in America, because it simply is not going to be profitable to be a housing authority anymore. So many of you had problems with housing authorities and their workers and the way they treated you. Well, you can say goodbye to that, because there simply is not enough generated funding in the back end for housing authorities to extract money to be profitable. So I don't see that. So if the state's going to receive the payment and they're going to make a decision whether they're going to handle it through their state agencies or turn it over to a housing authority, you may find that the state would probably enjoy receiving the funds versus trying to subcontract this to housing authorities that may have not ever really operated very well. Anybody that wants to suggest that the housing authority is somehow going to survive this at 60, 70% of the funding cut is crazy. This is the end for housing authorities. This is the end. It was by design. If you were fighting a war and you wanted to cripple an entire system, this is how you do it. Okay. Even if you change politics and the president's changed and we're in a new election, you cannot recover something that has been fundamentally changed so wholly. Okay. It's gone. All right. So that's where we stand with this. There isn't the Section 8 as we know it simply is irrelevant anymore. It's not relevant in the way that it's set up, operated, or the funding that's left. So as we climb into this, what my office is looking into right now is I'm trying to, as quickly as possible, to adapt to the potentials for the state to take control of this. That means all 50 states, including Hawaii, looking at how they're going to possibly procedurally do this. In other words, they're going to have to learn very quickly how to operate like a housing authority and how best to use the funding. The good news is they're probably not going to have a lot of oversight. There's going to be a lot of mistakes and a lot of errors and probably even some abuse of the system. But I think that in the end, a lot of people that have utilized vouchers and remained on them for decades that were not seniors and disabled will be ultimately kicked out of there and will remain so until the end of this term. Getting a new president will not mean that we're going to suddenly reinvoke Section 8, HUD, and everything. It will require even greater than an act of Congress to reestablish already what's been cut and changed. In other words, a new president, even with all the power, will require too much to somehow bring back Section 8 as it used to be. And we're reaching that point. The final blow, in my opinion, will be if the House and Congress clear it in 2026. If they clear what they're suggesting here by their own budget proposal now, if you're asking where I'm getting my information, this is a submitted budget by Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States. There's no questioning that. This is what he wants to do for 2026, and this will likely be what's going to happen, okay? So we'll be looking at policies and procedures, how states may potentially handle this, and also the fallout from probably, again, 2.3 million people losing their voucher. Now, this will not be an instantaneous wave, but people will likely start to get notices as we approach 2026, especially the discussion is going to blow up online. And what I see right now is I see a lot of YouTube creators creating bullshit. Okay, just today I watched a video rank very highly. Okay, used to my channel's videos used to rank very high like that, but he picked a really good topic, and he said they were ending all Section 8. Look, they're not ending this. They're giving control of it over to state agencies. Okay, so it's not the end of housing. We need to adapt. Everybody here needs to adapt. But the problem is, while I'm suggesting you adapt to these changes, we don't necessarily know how these changes are going to play out. In other words, just because the state's going to receive a check and it's going to be a block grant to them, we don't know if they're going to handle it, what agencies are going to handle it through, with the policies and procedures. Look, I've been doing what I do 25 years, and I've got to figure out how, what they're going to do, what the rules are. And so I'm just like everybody else. I'm as curious as anybody. I would figure they're going to probably adopt as many of the policies early on as to closely clone what Section 8 is. at least till they can figure out their own format. So that's what we're looking at. Now, questionably here, many of you have the questions that are run across your mind is, well, how accurate could this guy be? Well, accurate enough to have been one of the biggest publishers of Section 8 topics in general. And as a consultant for the former Section 8, I can tell you, a 25-year career, I'm pretty accurate, but we are speculating. We're speculating as to how this will be handled going forward. So if the budget clears for 2026, this will be a journey for all of us. In fact, I believe from right now, we only have a half year till about 2026, right? So we're all taking a journey right now, and this journey is going to lead somewhere different. At the end of this journey, there will not be Section 8. There will be the federal government issuing funds to the states, and then we're all going to have to figure out how that's going to work, because there isn't a manual in place for it. We don't know, and every state has the right to do what they wish with that money. That means that operably, this all could be very different for each state, which means even in my career line as a consultant, it means that I would need to figure out how the system works in 50 different states. So I can tell you early on that I will be looking for, if it ends up being that way, I will be looking mostly in California and New York, where the highest demands are, and see how far out we can expand. But as of now, we don't know what the states are going to do when they receive the money. There isn't any playbook out there, and we don't know if there's going to be any bilateral cooperation between PHAs in the state or the city. So there's a lot to interpret here. The one thing that I'm most concerned with is many of you are worried whether or not we're having funding. That shouldn't be your biggest issue. Your biggest issue should be is whether or not you qualify. I think also the issue of portability that has been played very well, even by my office, to help people get housing vouchers and money for that, will no longer be effective in 2026, because, again, housing authorities are going to be removed from the picture of the state and pick this up. And you can't port something that's operated at a state level. So that means this is a complete reinvention of an entire system, unless there is cooperation state to state. So there's so much we don't know. So every day I'm reading like a madman through the news, reaching out to contacts at HUD's office, DC office, reaching out to constituents at different PHAs across the nation that are larger to figure out what's going on. Now let's talk about landlords. This is going to change things fundamentally for landlords as well. Landlords are going to be affected in terms of housing and payments. With the reduction of funding, a lot of landlords, new landlords, are going to hop in the system. They notice that rent standards will no longer be effective after probably 2026. That there will be a different standard in place. I don't know if feds are going to handle that anymore. If they do handle what those standards are, then budgets will dictate. It's the state's budget's going to dictate how much they're willing to spend. So this is like a chain reaction of effects, and nobody, I don't care how great your mind is, it's going to take a lot to figure this out and put it on paper. So I'm going to go into comments real quick. And I know we're talking about a lot of topics in an open way, but honestly, when you shut down one system and you don't have a plan in place for what's to come in 2026, this is what we arrive at, is we don't know. So that's what I'm looking around for every day. I'm probing to find out if any one of the 50 states is beginning to look at what it's going to mean to receive all that money and what they're going to do with it. How are they going to disperse vouchers? How are they going to make those decisions? None of that stuff's being talked about. The only thing's being talked about is a juicy topic of, funding's getting cut, but nobody's talking about dispersion of vouchers, how all that's going to be handled. Okay. So moving on to the comments here, I'm going to address this, guys. I only just ask one favorable thing. Please do not turn this into a political platform. I'm not here to blame any party. We're just trying to discuss what happens moving into 2026, okay, in terms of housing. Let's see. Politically, Nate says, good morning. Tempting tangent, good mornings to you as well. And then, let's see, Politically, Nate says, I have a question regarding the FSS program. Just to let you know, FSS program will no longer exist after next year, so this may not be relevant for you. You can ask the question, but let's be clear about this. Home ownership and FSS will not exist after next year. Okay, it's gone. I know I'm going to make videos all week to go over what's going to be leaving. And while it may be tangible for you guys to ask me these questions, I'm just finding out myself. In other words, I'm just trying to bring this to you. But home ownership, now look, if you're already in the program, then you will be, if you don't, whatever's left of it will be ending in 2026. If you're in home ownership program right now, you need to hurry up and get where you're going with that, okay? Because they're not going to fund that next year. Okay, that's the end of that. So you go on to say regards to FSS, will that be going? Okay, well, that was your question. I should have read first and then commented. Politically, because wow, where do you apply for a voucher? Right now, we can issue a list to you. You'll have to wait, and I'll pop a link in here. This as well as including the affordable housing online is usually where you go, but you may find that the way that's set up and how all that works will likely be going as away in 2026 too, because that would require, again, if the states receive funding, then they're probably not going to put this stuff on that website. Okay, so that means that will likely be the end of affordable housing online as you know it, or a restructuring of it to match this each state's desire. Okay, and how they run their waiting list if they even have them. Okay, Nikki, is it better to be in California, red state, Indiana? Well, when we refer to things as red states, political states, Democrat states, Republican, it doesn't matter what state you're in. It only matters that what the state's going to do. We don't know how states are going to handle funding. What somebody might do in Vermont compared to Louisiana to Oklahoma or California, we'll see. Now, if it's a highly liberal state, then maybe they have liberal policies. If it's a non-liberal state, then maybe they have tighter policies. I don't know. I'm not a politician. Flores Corson says, excellent. Sharing posts. Nikki, I already have a Section 8. Now, for those of you that already have vouchers, you're already in ESG, block grants, project-based housing, all these different things, you're going to be probably, what's going to happen is after the state receives the funding rather than the feds and housing authorities handle this, you're going to be probably graduated to a state level voucher. So in other words, you'll be given a fair opportunity to trade your voucher in for whatever the state is granting. In other words, if you've got a Section 8 voucher and starting next year, the housing authorities no longer exist and the state is the one controlling the vouchers, then you'll be asked to requalify likely under the state level voucher and then meet their policies and procedures, which we don't know what they are yet. In order for something to actually happen and the big change to be effective, it has to completely happen, and it hasn't completely happened yet. We know there's going to be a gray area. There's going to be about a half a year through next 2026 where things are going to be kind of up in the air because, you know, we're switching from a federal to a state system. That means the same thing from my office. I will be rapidly trying to learn how to keep up with the individual needs of each of the 50 states and their requirements for housing and vouchers. So for those who already have something, you will likely be stepping back in to the state, taking your old voucher and exchanging it for something new. You'll be probably requalifying, and you're probably going to need to forget about the way that things have operated. Many of you are stuck on Section 8, how it works now. It is not going to operate the same exact way. Now, I would imagine to some degree, housing authorities as well as the state are going to try to slow this down and make it a little bit easier for people to transition. In other words, maybe take the process a little bit slower in 2026 while they figure out how best to do this. So we're going to have a transition period. It's going to be confusing. Many of you are going to think, okay, well, these are my rights. This is the rights I used to have in 2023, 2025 through HUD and the housing authority. And it's going to be a little bit of a culture shock for you that now this has changed and now the state controls it and it ain't got nothing to do with HUD anymore. So we're going to see a lot of big changes there. So what I'm telling you guys is start to wrap your mind around this. The easiest way to get information right now, since none of us really seem to have it, is by watching the news and look at what Congress has to say, look at what your president has to say, look at potentially what HUD's bringing up, and we're all kind of guessing right now because until the 50 states take control of this funding, it still remains a federal matter. But that federal, the best controlling this, again, will end in 2026. And that's when all these new changes are going to be. So going back to comments, Poetically Nate says, yes, I'm in the program now. DJ, so basically seniors disabled will likely qualify, but the program rules and payment standards could be completely different. The entire system that we're going to face for 2026 will be absolutely different. Maybe the states will a little bit as a warming gift do some things the same as what Section 8 has been for the last 50 to 80 years, but we should all expect to transition to a completely new system. And that system can be very much different state to state. That's where this will be problematic. Remember, the federal funding is no longer going to the feds and HUD. It's going to be going directly to the state as a state block grant. That allows each state to operate differently. That means it's going to be 50 different systems, okay? 50 different sets of rules. There's no requirement by the federal government to make this one universal system across all 50 states. In other words, if you try to move your voucher or whatever it is you have in Louisiana, say California, it may not even be the same there. And that's what we face right now. So we're looking to see how this is going to play out. And to do that, we need to keep our minds open. It doesn't mean that anybody is going to suffer through this. It just simply means that we need to adjust to a big budget cut, 60% cut. We need to adjust that they're going to be 2-year term limits. We need to adjust our mind to the potential that the requirements for each state and city could be completely different, and that housing authorities notably may not even exist except for the larger ones moving into the future. And when I mean the future, I mean the next 6 months. So this is what we face. People are not talking about this on TV. What's more popular to talk about right now is budget cuts, but we're not looking at the true effect here. When HUD and the federal government says, hey, we're no longer funding housing authorities, we're giving the money to the state, that means that is the end of Section 8. There's no other way to read this. If you don't believe me, get on the news or read around. You'll figure out very quickly what they're telling you. This is the end of one program and the beginning of something new. And for many of you that have been part of our channel, God, some of you for almost a decade or longer, y'all already knew better. I mentioned this before, that by 2030, we will likely see the dissolution or the insolvency of one system and a whole new system begin. And this is the best way for this to happen. Oh, and we got a visitor. So there's little mama. She's decided to join our video. Little mama, you want to talk to our audience? Let's see if I can get her in here. There she is. She gets bored sometimes, and she's my office manager. So she gets bored, and when she was a baby, I used to keep her, hold her when she was a little kitten, and this was her favorite chair. She used to nurse in this chair, and she still sits up there. And in some of my videos, she'll even groom my hair. She'll lick for hours. It's especially crazy when I'm doing a video. All right. So anyways, for those that are curious about my cat, that is little mama. She's a big girl now. She's going on about 4 for you pet lovers. And no, I don't curate my videos. My cats always decide when they want to be in videos. And today she's going to be our superstar and my office manager. All right, guys. So back to the topic. So yeah, this does create some alarm for all of us. Nobody's happy to hear change, but in many ways, guys, if this means the end of the rather brutal treatment by PHAs and housing authorities in a very broken system, I've compared Section 8 in its system to a rotten cake. We started with a tiny cake with a 1 layer of icing. And through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way up to now, 50 years later, we kept putting icing over that nasty, rotten cake that was rotten at the core. And so in the end, this was a broken system. Now, this is the most brutal way to end it, but this is the way that it ended. And it ended in a way that even I didn't imagine. I thought we would go to a cash system to help people. I didn't imagine it going this way. But hey, sometimes you got to think out the box, I suppose. So if Congress approves next year, either way, even if Congress doesn't approve this, the damage to the system as it is, the dissolution of it, the handicapping of it, will create the collapse of it anyway. So it's inevitable. No president, no new president is going to be able to unwrap what's already been done. I'm sorry. I mean, with 90% of the HUD's employees gone, 3 more years of housing authorities, no money will cause insolvency across the country for housing authorities. So many of them simply won't exist anyways. You can't get all that back easily. Okay. So don't think another president's just going to jump in here and undo this. It's not that easy. And so it's better just to move on. So what our channel is going to focus on from here till the next congressional term will be looking at what the new policies and procedures will be, how states potentially handle this, which cities and states are going to probably contract with the housing authority, and which cities and states are going to handle this internally. And for those of you that are seniors, the Council on Aging, and we may see the states may allocate a lot more to nonprofits as well. That means if nonprofits handle more of this, you might have a better chance. We're also going to watch 15-year waiting lists vanish. It means a lot of vouchers now you'll be able to likely get within 6 months across the nation. The state of California will get what it's always wanted: full control over vouchers. The feds will no longer be involved and just hand California the payment. Same thing with New York. So that means the state of California and New York will, by rules, be forced to no longer give out vouchers to people that sat on them for 30 years. So, and with the term limits, that means most seniors and disabled will now be able to very quickly get a voucher. Now, at first, it won't be fast because we're looking at a new system handled by the state, every different state. But those that have a household with a senior or disabled person in it, and after the hard part's over, the first year or so, this will be very, very easy for seniors and disabled to get housing. It will exit virtually everybody else out, and with a 2-year term limit with work requirements, most people aren't going to find that worth their time to even get involved. That may be useful for those that. Well, that's wrong. I'm saying that's wrong. There will be one category that will benefit largely on a 2-year limit. Same people that it's always served, but this time much better. And that'll be those coming off the street. Why? Because homeless people tend to be highly grateful for the opportunity to get housing. And even if it's for 2 years, and that might allow them, it's kind of like rapid rehousing. So it allowed them to stabilize for up to 2 years. And so I think that the term limit with work requirements will be of a great benefit to the homeless and give them a fresh opportunity that they probably struggle to get housing. So in a way, for those that don't want to do much, it's going to eliminate all the people sitting on their ass. Okay. People that are lazy ain't going to want to fool with this. The homeless people out there that have struggled so hard to even get on the waiting list and get housing, it's going to make it exceptionally easy for them to get in the system and get a fair chance, and many of which that are disabled. So we're going to, the biggest thing that pleases me is I'm hoping the state puts the right type of people in place that have a little bit of humility, a little bit of character, and a little bit of compassion, something we don't see, because this is going from what used to be a profitable situation from a housing authority to the state handling, which means that means state officials now will be making determinations and decisions. It's no longer going to be for profit. And if they do decide to partner, it's likely most states are going to partner with nonprofits. So that's a big winner for many of you that are potentially Christians, homeless, people that may have dealt with Catholic charities. These organizations will likely be the bigger recipients to help mediate this. And so we may find that a lot of dignity and respect is recaptured through the system by allowing it to work this way. And we also will see that all the wasteful spending, where we have watched 50 years where PHAs blow money. And by the way, the housing authorities are going to have to sell their portfolio. All this project-based housing, that'll all probably go up. That's probably all going to be on a chopping block. Housing authorities have invested millions in buildings all around the nation. Well, without this money, they got to sell their portfolio and just call it a day. So that'll be the end. So I'd imagine many housing authorities, they're going to be on an unemployment line. Most of the employees, they're not going to survive in this. I don't see most cities wanting to deal with housing authorities. Unless the city itself owns its housing authority, then in most cases, housing authorities will not be, this will be the end for them. Now, as we do know, many cities are and do control their own voucher system. So those are the ones that will be more capable in the beginning. That'll be places like Los Angeles and New York. But the rest of the states, say the bottom 43, in this case, they may decide who they want to partner with. I think their best possible decision will be with nonprofits. So there's going to be a transitional period. This is a good thing. And so we're going to see a whole big old change. And I'm really excited about the lack of waiting times. This is going to uncomplicate a lot of things. But for it to be uncomplicated, we need to look at how much time this is going to take to get it normalized. So everybody has to be patient. Those that have now with a voucher, you're going to have to learn how to convert. You got to requalify. You're no longer dealing with the same system. But the biggest thing I'm hoping to benefit is the lower waiting times and probably getting a hell of a lot more dignity and respect out the system. With the state turning this over likely to Health and Human Services, it means that a lot of you already have relationships with that state agency in your home state. They're likely going to be the biggest candidate of this. The other bigger candidates are going to be administrators for the Continuum of Care program, places like Catholic Charities and otherwise. They'll help administrate the other half of this. And since all this is going to be rolled into either just an emergency voucher or a Section 8 voucher, and I don't know what they're going to call it here in 2026, let's just say that the homeless voucher and also the main voucher, they'll probably rename that. It will no longer be Section 8 and become something different. So I'm as curious as anybody else as how the states will handle this. All right, so let's see who. Cran says, hey, little mama. And Deborah, how would this potential stuff impact someone like me? Well, Deborah, it's going to impact everybody. The key thing here is we don't need to think that it's going to impact us badly, okay? It's a change. It's a change. And it's probably, look, if you've already got a corrupt system that's broken and it doesn't work, you've got housing authorities and people talking ignorant to people, you're waiting on 20-year waiting list, and all of a sudden you're given an opportunity where they're turning the funding over and removing it from the Fed. The Feds are turning it over to the state, and you're being given a better chance to get a voucher at half the time and be treated better. I wouldn't care how this is going to play out, as long as it plays out better than it already has. I mean, I can't imagine the state and state agencies doing worse than the local housing authority. In fact, it pleases me to find that most of these housing authorities will vanish after this. There won't be any more if there is project-based housing, nobody's going to want that anymore, because look, the only people going to be left are seniors and disabled, except for those who are on the 2-year requirements. So if you're not a senior or disabled, then you get a voucher and you have a maximum of a 2-year limit, and they will require work requirements. If you don't want to do that, then you no longer utilize the system. That evacuates, that brings back 2.1 million, 60,000 vouchers, and kicks out 2.3 million people. So if you're a senior and disabled, or any version of that, or your family composition has a senior or disabled in it, then you're going to be looking at especially short times. And so we'll be discussing that heavily for 2026, because I'm hoping our office will be able to assist clients with getting vouchers at rapid paces. I mean, lightning fast. In fact, as soon as I can adapt my office to the policies of each state, we'll be looking at trying to help clients get vouchers in 6 months or less. Okay. We might return to 4 months, the old days back pre-pandemic, where you can get a voucher in about 4 months. Okay. But we have to look at how this is going to work out. Now, there will be a lot of funding cuts, but that funding cuts are parallel to kicking all those people out. So the days of 10-year waiting lists, I think probably the longest waiting list we may see after 2026 may be just 3 or 4 years. And that's if you had the worst qualifications. But the thing about it is, the gambit of having preferences and prioritizing will be over. There's only one priority going in 2026, senior disabled. If you're not those two things or one of them, then you're not a priority. So we don't have to worry about playing complicated games to get vouchers anymore. Now, the game of portability and moving around, well, that's useful in the old system, but it's not going to be necessary in the new one. All right, so moving back down here, says LA has a budget deficit of $1 trillion. Saying, look, this whole country's got a budget deficit. There is not a single state in the U.S. that's doing well. Okay, we're drowning in debt. It doesn't matter. We still, every state, including the country, we print money like there's no tomorrow. That's not gonna do anything. Sheila Neal, question: what happened to landlords since Section 8 budget cut freeze? Well, look, it's adapt or burn. For landlords, I don't think landlords are going to be affected that big. There's going to be some effect at the beginning because when you cut funding, obviously housing authorities want to spend less. But the control of housing authorities will end effectively the next congressional term. In other words, the housing authority's control over this whole system will likely evaporate the next congressional term. When Trump makes these changes and sends the money to the state, the housing authority no longer receives a dime. That's the end of housing authorities. It's over with. Unless your city has a housing authority controlled by its city itself, then the housing authorities all across America can pack your shit and go home. You're done. Okay? Unless your state decides it wants to partner with the housing authorities in your state, then pack your shit and go home. It's over with. That's the end of the era. You no longer have the opportunity to not answer the phone, keep your door closed, and treat people like shit. It's over with for you. Pack your shit and go home. It's now controlled by the state. The state will determine whether or not it gives you a 1 copper penny. If the state doesn't want to allocate the money it gets to your housing authority, then pack your shit and sell the building because you're no longer going to be relevant after 2026. I say that with great pride. I'm glad to see the shit system go. All right, politically made. Yes, new system changes are happening. When will we get used to it and adapt? Well, again, I want to say something. With the new changes, even with, 2-year caps and a work requirement, more than likely, again, it's going to benefit the homeless the biggest. The people that are going to want this are while most people that have sat on a voucher and had no requirement, they're not going to want this. So this is going to be set up perfect for people that are homeless that are willing to do what it takes to go out and get a little bit of employment. And they're going to be the ones that benefit the biggest from the 2-year caps. Okay. Not only that, but most homeless are disabled. So that means that technically many of them will be able to get a voucher at a rapid pace through both systems. Through a standard voucher. Right now, I'm just going to refer to it as a standard voucher and a homeless voucher because we don't know what the states are going to call it. DJ, what about cuts to the USDA program? Look, all federal programs related to housing are gone next year, okay? Forget about home ownerships and all these things until they decide at the state level what to do. FSS gone next year, okay? That's if Congress approves the plan. So home ownership as it stands will remain in place and is going to receive funding. There will be no new opportunities. So if you're in home ownership right now, you have your foot in the door, you took your classes, then you're fine. After 2026 congressional, you'll continue to see those that have right now or in the system for HUD home ownership, you'll be grandfathered through and you'll receive funding for as long as Congress deems that important. Okay, but there will be no new homeownership after this unless states decide to participate in that and Congress funds that. So if you manage to get into homeownership, complete the process and get it done before the next congressional term, you're in. If you don't, forget about it until the states decide what to do with the state grant block funding, okay? This is what it's going to be. It's no longer going to be HUD funding. It's going to be state block funding. All right, so Chanel Stover, senior 55 plus, senior, now the determination of ages can change as well. As of now, I believe the age determination is 62. Judah, what if you are in an appeal for SSI disability and live in subsidized house? Will you be affected? Well, we don't know. Here's the thing. We know under the old rules or the current rules that disability is how they frame it up to be under Section 8 and HUD in Section 8 is Title 24. States will determine what is disabled. So the standard of disability will be determined likely by the state in 2026. Now, that can mean that it could cover a lot of things. We don't know just yet. The only people that are going to be protected as disabled are the ones that already receive a disability payment, okay? That means you're pre-qualified. I don't know because we don't have policies, procedures, any of this. And we don't know. Every state can have a different reasoning with this. That's why this is going to be an exploration into fresh territory all the way till the next congressional term. Let's see. DJ, this is going to be difficult for me personally. 6 years planning USDA mortgage. Again, for those of you that are HUD and homeownership, you'll continue to be funded. You need to get whatever your homeownership. Look, guys, if you're going to get a voucher, go ahead and get it, okay? If you're going to do your housing, SSF, whatever you're going to do, make sure you wrap up your business before for 2026 congressional term. That's all I can tell you. If you sit around in your hands and you don't do something now, then you're going to be adopted under new rules. And even those of you that have now, you're still going to have to requalify, because once they hand over federal dollars to the state will determine what's good and what's not, who qualifies and who's unqualified, okay? They're not going to care about old rules. It's whatever the state determines they're going to do with their funding. It becomes theirs to decide what to do. If they want to open a housing authority themselves, they'll do it. They want to partner with a housing authority, they'll do it. This is the direction it's going. Anybody that says this is not going to happen or go this particular direction is a fool. Okay. And then we still have 2028, 2029. Okay, guys. And that allows Mr. Trump to make additional changes. So we need to adapt every year, every 12 months. Matter of fact, from now to the end of Mr. Trump's term, we need to be adapting every day. Because look, he's talking about 2026. The minute 2026, he's going to be talking about 2027. He can decide to cut another half the budget. He could eliminate HUD altogether. There may not even be a HUD left after this. And then there's 28, 29, right? So we need to adapt. I'm doing it. Look, I'm a Section 8 consultant. My job will become eliminated altogether in 6 months. Okay? What I do, quite literally, is done. There isn't anything left to it. This is the where you turn off the light bulbs and you walk out the door and you don't look back. I'm sticking around because I'm curious now. I've waited a lifetime to watch the system change. So rather than retire, I'm most curious to see whether or not we're going to be dealing with a really good system with short wait times and be able to get people through it easier. And this is going to be a better system. Or will we descend into the bowels of hell with this? And it goes very badly. But one thing I know is unfortunately, it's going to create some homelessness. We're probably going to see a little over 1 million people hit the streets. A lot of people that have gotten away with sitting on vouchers that just didn't have any incentive in life. Well, your ass is fixing to hit the sidewalk. With that 2-year term work requirements, you don't show up for work, you're out. That voucher gets mailed right back to the state, and then they're going to give it to somebody who wants to work. We're going to watch a lot of people that are homeless get housed. We're going to watch a lot of lazy people like Bob and Susan, soccer mom and soccer dad, sit on that voucher for the last 20 years. Well, they're fixing to hit the street. They're going to find out. They're going to put on those nice sidewalk flip-flops, and they're going to figure out what life's about. In other words, you're going to get with it or get out. So we're going to see a lot of this laziness just getting pushed out. There ain't going to be nothing free. If you want to get in this system, you need to be a senior or disabled. Otherwise, you got a 2-year requirement, and once the clock ticks down 2 years, you're done. Okay? So let me tell you something. That old lady that lives next to you, you better make friends with her. You remember that guy in that wheelchair he was making these laughing at? You better invite him to live with you, because if they're not on your voucher, you ain't going to get nothing but 2 years. So everybody needs to reach out to everybody old and everybody in a wheelchair, because you're going to need somebody in a household that's a senior or disabled. So everybody needs to think about that. For you landlords, if you're going to rent to people, they better be a senior or a disabled. Otherwise, you're going to have a high turnover in your building. That's the reality. Now, if you want to run a motel, go ahead. You're kicking people in and out. It's a 2-year voucher, and I don't know if you can reapply for this 2-year voucher. Now, I don't want nobody going out there and making themselves disabled, okay? I don't do that. But, there's loopholes, and my job, part of that's looking at that. And if you think, guys, I'm not a fool, I'm going to be looking at the loopholes. So I can guarantee you this is like a big party for me, because I know when the state picks this up, I'm going to be reading very carefully through every policy and procedure. Where there's a way, there's a will, and I will find it. Because I can tell you, they're going to make a lot of mistakes, and I'll be right there to capture it. And for those that are around, I'll help you through it. For as long until they figure out how to operate this in tandem with being able to eliminate those loopholes, because I'm an expert with loopholes. I'm always looking for them. HUD never solved their own. That's how I existed so long. So, going back down, let's see. Israel's a thing. Why are we worried about Israel? We need to worry about people's asses on the sidewalk here in the U.S., okay? We need to worry about us Americans. Of course, we love people in Israel. We love people from all over, but we need to worry about your own ass. People that need housing. Politically Mate says, for real, 2026 is real. Look, 2026 is about as real as it's ever going to get. You're going to get a lesson in something very new, okay? And it ain't about the feds. Ain't nobody crying. Nobody wants to hear about your harassment and discrimination after that. Those agencies will be dissolved. Fair housing, look, it's going to be state housing. That's what it's going to be. Nobody wants to hear any of that bullshit after that. It's over with, okay? You think I'm joking? Watch what happens. A lot of you guys are going to get waylaid with this. You'd be like, oh, this guy's just talking shit in this channel. Look, I talked more of the truth in this channel as a Section 8 consultant for 25 years than most people have ever understood the housing system. I'm not an entertainer, and I'm not a clown, okay? I've been here a long time. You want to see rodeo clowns? This channel's filled with nuts out here talking all kinds of shit about Section 8. They don't understand it. They've never read Title 24. They don't understand policies, procedures, anything. They're like a squawking doll that gets on here and just breathes whatever they read on NBC, CBN, CNN, and they think it's the truth. Other ones just like to capture your fear. I was watching a few videos earlier, and you could just see that this little girl had just got her GED out the bubblegum machine, and now she's talking on YouTube about shit she don't understand. Little girl, she got her toy mop and think, you know what I'm saying? So let's be honest. But the system is changing. All right, so Misha Williams, yes, we're a little. Well, I'm sorry to hear they're sabotaging. Michael Toll, the homeless numbers will increase substantially. Well, that's what's going to happen. The people that are homeless that need housing will get it. The people that took housing for granted will get their ass kicked out. So we're going to see a change. We're going to see a lot of people that are lazy sitting in the homeless shelter and on the sidewalk, and we're going to see homeless people finally get off the street. So there's real homeless, and then there's I'm too lazy and became homeless. Okay, so we got the real homeless and we got the fake homeless. So the fake homeless are going to become homeless. Krantz says just hollers. Well, thank you. So you only get 2 years to stay on Section 8. Well, by the time they process your application, run you through it, you meet the requirements, you probably have about a year and a half. Just a little taste, and they kick you right back out. And what's going to be harder is no landlord's going to want that voucher. No landlord's going to want a 2-year voucher. It's just a big old waste of time for landlords. You see, this whole thing, I got to say one thing about Trump, man. He's an expert at derailing things. If I ever seen a hostile takeover and dissolution of an agency, this was almost done perfectly. Instead of defunding vouchers, he understood from the beginning the best way to kill the system was to kill it through the housing authority. So he capsized the funding to drown it and make the housing authorities insolvent, which incidentally by side effect caused the whole system to fail, right? And then by setting up something short-term and unwanted like 2-year vouchers, he knows that most people don't want that bullshit. So what is he doing? He's ensuring that the only people that will ever really get this are going to be seniors and disabled. It was set up expertly. It was like they sat around and thought about this carefully. Cause and effect. Well played. It's well played. Very well played. If you're out there and you got family children, you're going to need to make friends with a senior or disabled. There are going to be ways to get around this, okay? But this is, I got to say, out of all the things he's done, the way he did this, the way he collapsed the system was well played. Very well. And again, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I've talked badly about both parties because I really don't like either party, but this was well played. I mean, I'm pretty sure he had a group of Harvard students think about how this would play out, and it was well played because this will be the final blow in 2026. Any trash left in the system, he will sweep up in 28, and then the last fart in the room you'll smell will be in 2029. There'll be nothing left. There will be just a faint memory of housing authorities and Section 8, and that'll be the end. And ain't no damn. You could put any Democrat you want in that office for the next 8 years. They're not going to be able to unroll this. There's no way to unroll it. There's no going back. It's gone. I mean, like I said, this guy. Trump, I can tell you, man, I'm not favorable on things he does, and I'm not a big fan of the guy, but this was This is like you would do in business with a hostile takeover, and he played it expertly. It's shocking how well he did this. But to the credit of one thing, it's going to serve and assist those that need it, and that'll be seniors, disabled, and I can guarantee you that veterans will be built into this. Veterans will be. So there'll be a third category, and that will be veterans. And I know the state's going to pick that up because he's had pretty strong emotions about that. All right, so let me get on the comments here. Me and my mom are on Section 8. She's disabled. So you're fine there, Crow Dog. Don't worry about it. A lot of you guys are sweating something you shouldn't. Look, we don't know just yet if the state's going to just put the 2-year term for one time, or they may have different options. It could turn out that the 2-year term limit can be per person. Well, if your household has 8 people, that means 8 different people can apply at 8 different times. Look, I'm already looking for the loopholes, okay, guys? It's my job to do that, as sad and shitty as that is. I'm not going to help anybody break the law, but I'm all about exploitation. If you fucked up and you didn't write the right rules, then it's my job to understand how to get around them, okay? Otherwise, what purpose would I serve? So 2-year timeline for what I've had to qualify for Section 8 in the last 22 years. I'm elderly. Well, you won't need to qualify anymore. In fact, I would imagine the states will set it up that anybody that is senior or disabled, once you have this, that'll be the end of it. You'll no longer need to continue to requalify, as long as you don't win the lottery, you don't become independently wealthy, and otherwise. So you'll have a recertification, but nobody will question whether or not you deserve that voucher anymore after this. You'll just simply, because there'll be lots of extra vouchers. There'll be 60,000 extra vouchers just sitting in a drawer, basically, across the states. And with term limits, that eliminates any waits. That will put the waits very short. Samuel Ventros, will HUD Bash be affected? Oh, well, HUD Bash, I think that HUD Bash, well, first of all, Bash will be a different system going forward. So there'll be funding for that, but they're probably the states will be allocating it, and it'll be likely something different. Remember, the feds are no longer going to be handling this after 2026. The states will. So HUD Bash will become something different. Well, it looks like she's taking a shower here, my cat. I apologize. I didn't expect her to completely bathe in my video, but little mama, she, for those who haven't noticed my cat there, you see her? She is going to town. Must be the new flea collar. All right. Well, let's see here. Probably turn housing authorities into affordable housing. Well, I think it'll turn housing authorities into a parking lot. There's no funding for them. What are they going to do? The ones that are not run by the city, the housing authorities, you sell the building, you collect your pocket of change, and then you go on. That's the end of you. The state doesn't need your assistance. Does not need the housing authority to earn a nickel. Housing authorities earn a profit by being independent. That's being removed. Being a housing authority is no longer profitable unless the city owns it. That eliminates 90% of all housing authorities. That means that Bob, Nancy, Shaniqua, and everybody else, you can pack your shit, find you a new career, because you're not going to be working in the housing authority. Okay? Don't take my interpretation of saying Shaniqua means I'm some kind of racist. I'm not. I'm just suggesting that everybody at the housing authority needs to reconsider your position. You're not going to have one at a housing authority unless you work in a major city. Okay? Let's see. Funny Mantis Bids. Hit the like button so YouTube can push this video. Thank you, Funny Mantis. Yeah, if you do like the videos, stay on. And I can be quite colorful. It's all the time spicy. Sometimes I use profanities. I'm good at abuse. So if you want to mistreat me, talk badly about me, go ahead. I've made videos about 15 years. I am a Section 8 consultant. The next year I won't be anybody because the system's changing. I'm certainly going to be looking at how to be a state consultant. And I will continue to help clients through the new changes in the new system. And it's still my goal to help seniors and veterans and the homeless. It's not my goal to help anybody that's smoking a crack pipe or having a cold whiskey under the bridge. That's a different breed of people, okay? I'm here for the people who want to do the right thing, to want to go on with life. All right, so Gloria in New Jersey, I think they should convert all the closed house. Well, with all The housing authorities have large portfolios around the U.S. They own buildings because they have project-based housing. With the dissolution of most housing authorities, it means those portfolios will then go back on the market, and they'll likely have to sell them for nothing, or at least a market rate. So that'll be a great opportunity for the state to buy up all that project-based housing, revitalize it, and turn it into standard housing. People can use a voucher. So another thing I want to say is another national effect of losing housing authorities in mass will be that will likely be the end of project-based housing as we know it. Those buildings will likely sell, they'll become new owners, and then investors will likely take over from there unless there's a partnership between there. So we may see another dirty part of the system disappear, and that will be likely project-based housing because there is not going to be funding part of that. It requires a housing authority, and I don't see that Donald J. Trump is going to pour a single dollar into project-based housing. It's not in his agenda. It's not important to him, and he doesn't want it. So what will happen is you'll either qualify for a voucher, you'll be on term limit, or you'll be under private investment as a tenant, okay? And you're using your request for tenancy. And that too will change, your request for tenancy. For those of you who have home ownership, I don't know what that means for you in the future. I know that a lot of the new programs that they have issued, including self-sufficiency, will not exist in the future. We're not funding all this extra stuff, okay? So it'd be state block grant funding starting for 2026 as they roll it out. And the only thing that you can get through the system basically at this point will be vouchers and emergency vouchers going into 2026. And this will all be mandated through the state. There'll be an option to be controlled by nonprofits, state-run housing authorities only, and possibly council on aging. Social services may be the biggest winner of most of the federal funds, as they will be the ones determining the administrative burden to cut and qualify vouchers, unless, again, the state is set up. So, as you can see, there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to wrap this video. This has been a very long one, I know, because my jaw's starting to hurt, and I love to talk. And when my jaw starts to hurt, it means I've been talking too long. So our next video, we're going to have a couple of videos this week. We're going to get a little bit deeper into this. I'm learning with you, too. I don't want you to think I'm an expert at what's not happened so far. But we'd all be fools not to continually probe for that information as we get closer to the next term. We got a half a year till that happens. That's when some major changes, the biggest changes, are going to happen, and then further. So I'm going to be knocking on everybody's door all the way from the White House down to get answers as to what each state might do with the new funding and how this is going to play out for all parties. I know a lot of you ask questions I didn't get an opportunity to answer. I apologize. I'm going to wait till the video is calmer, and then maybe I'll come back and issue, or we'll try a different one. This appears to be an extremely popular video at this point. I'm pretty sure it will explode. I expect that there'll be 1/4 of hate mail in here mixed in with people they're not going to like what I've had to say. There's going to be 1/4 of people saying I'm fear-mongering, and another 1/4 in disbelief, and then about a half of them that want to know more. Okay? I'm okay. I'm a big boy. I can handle what everybody's saying. But look, if you can't read between the lines and you think this is going to go some other direction, you're crazy. Okay? Trump has already said what he's going to do. He made it clear. He said that in his own report. State block grant funding. Goodbye, HUD. Goodbye, the federal system for housing. Goodbye. Okay? The only way that would change is somehow the Democrats won the House, and even then. So you need to look to what it's going to be. And no, nobody knows how they're going to administrate all these programs through the state yet. That's what I'm trying to find out. All right. So Gloria in New Jersey says, Deborah, no. Why is everybody picking on Deborah? All right, guys. I've enjoyed talking with you today. I will see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.